My name is Joan Baravoy. I'm chairperson of Ozark. Welcome to our April meeting. As you can see, we are on Zoom. We are not in-house at OSA. We were we were going to have an in-house meeting, and the response was very poor, to be very honest with you. I think 17 people responded that they would come into the office. So that you spoke, we heard. So we are not that we were ever going to move away from Zoom, but we just felt that it was after almost 5 years that we should attempt to have a meeting in the office. So obviously that's not something that retirees are comfortable with for whatever reasons. Susan O'Brien, secretary. Mark Lewis, I don't know if Mark is on. Mark Lewis is acting co-vice chair. I don't see Colleen Cox. She's volunteer to the board. She's a consultant to the board. Dr. Judith Lovell, I don't see her. She's a consultant to the board. Jay Wachowski. Jay is the Comro rep. Rob Spencer is OSA media director, and Megan Wolfsey is Bob Crogan's assistant. Um, Adam, do I introduce you?
Vice President.
Okay, Adam. So welcome everyone. We are going to today our speaker is Hank Shankoff. He is president of Shankoff Limited, which is a full-service strategic communications company serving corporate, political, and public affairs clients. He's worked on over 700 political campaigns all over the world, and his clients have included President Clinton, Mayor Bloomberg, and former president of the Dominican Republic. Hank has, I think in the past, this was a little bit before my time, presented to Ozark. So we thought that this would be, a good time to have him back since there's a lot going on. Mr. Shankoff is a frequent commentator on political issues in the media. He's a former CNN contributor and has taught and or lectured at NYU, Harvard, Fordham, Brooklyn College. He's been profiled in the Wall Street Journal, New York Times, and the Daily News. And he also, in his spare time, rabbinical ordination tell me if I'm Nahalat Chabad in Israel. And he holds a BA, MA, a master's in philosophy, and a PhD degree. So he's a busy gentleman. Hank, all
Thank
yours.
you. I'm grateful to be here, and I'm happy to talk about some of the things I think are going on, which you may agree with my analysis or not. And it's always good to talk about such things. I think disagreement is good, and discussing things through is very important. I have a particular fondness. I represent a lot. I represent a lot of labor organizations. I mean, my first client when I went on my own was Local 237 Teamsters. And except for the 13 years that Barry Feinstein was gone, after he got tossed out of the Teamsters during the federal takeover, Greg Floyd brought me back. And when he became president, and I've been there since, and we've done a lot of things to make politicians uncomfortable, which I think is the real role of labor unions, particularly in the public sector. So where do I think we are? You want to talk national? You want to talk local first? Which would you prefer? Your choice.
Okay. Yeah, you pick. It's okay.
Okay, nationally. We got Trump because we deserve Trump, because the Democratic Party has failed to understand blue collar people in this country and people who work for a living for quite some time. It's become a party of elites in New York, Washington, and Los Angeles, serving elites, and hasn't gone back to core principles or core ideas that created Democrats in the first place, but instead has become a group of Klansmen with small K, group of clans or factions that are not united on anything, and who are now going through a point of complete deterioration. And I think that what will come back is a party that will be much younger, much less internationalist, much less driven by worker concerns, because the people who will emerge have never put a callus on their hands. I mean, among the great liars and hypocrites is what's her name, Ms. Representative AOC, who talks about being a bartender. But I was a bartender. I worked at the stage. I was union counterman at the stage and the Carnegie and all those places. I know what it means to have blood come out of your feet after 8 hours plus an 8 overtime. She has no clue. They have no clue. But it sounds good, and the positioning they're taking is likely not to be pro-union because they've never experienced what it means to be without. I mean, again, you're a Congress member with a big mouth. You're making $200,000 a year, plus you have free health care for life, plus you have a pension, plus your transportation is paid for, plus you have a staff paid for. I mean, things that none of us, frankly, could ever think about. So I'm not hopeful about Democrats. I think that they also, the political structure is just beginning to respond to some very simple facts that most of Americans today cannot trace their roots to Europe, which tells you that there's a new melding of cultures, very much like what occurred in the early and central parts and mid parts of the 20th century, not just in New York, but around the nation. And how that works itself out is yet to be seen and hard to predict. The reindustrialization of the nation that Trump talks about is a fantasy. It'll take, I would think, probably, I read some economic projections, it would take 15 years, 10 to 15 years on the out, 5 at the bottom, as many as 15 years on the top, to try to create the reindustrialization that he predicts will occur as a function of tariffing. Now, tariffs historically have not been useful either in world politics or in economic settings. Smoot-Hawley tariffs, or the Smoot-Hawley tariff helped deepen the depression, Great Depression, and other forms of tariffing, which included limiting ship weights, resulted in the inability of the Japanese, for example, to get the fuel that they need to run a country which has no natural fuel base. And if you love the invasions of the Asian countries and the bombing of Pearl Harbor, you could love what comes next if this continues, because it could be pretty significant. It also reduces American interest in the Far East, where we have major defense commitments: Australia, New Zealand, and ANZUS treaty, and Taiwan, which the Chinese want, partially out of national pride, but also because it produces circuit boards more than any place else in the world, and other related computer and AI potential products. So it is important to the world for that reason. With respect to, this is a mess. Is it sufficient to call it a mess? No, I think it's a disaster over the long term for the country, because it reduces its capacity as an economic force. It makes Americans look as they are, which is ignorant of world events. The Americans believe somehow the world began with the surrender of Germany in 1945, and the world should actually be like that. When the Europeans understand 1,000 years of Russian history, and you can bet that unless there's some kind of quick resolution to the tirades by the Republicans against Europe, that you will see a nuclearized Germany and Poland, who will have no choice but to defend themselves against the Russians, because they understand history. The fascinating thing to me, I was saying before everybody got on, is the attack on Denmark and Canada. The early warning systems, NORAD, have much of their hardware and posts in Greenland and in Canada. And Canadians should have a special beef with the United States, considering that I think it's Juno Beach in Normandy is littered with Canadian blood, and that the ability to win the Normandy campaign during the Second World War depended to a great extent on Canadian troops and their willingness to put themselves in harm's way for the benefit of the West. Canadians served with American troops in places that people would not have suspected. And America is the only country that has invoked the charter, the portion of the NATO charter requiring that other nations who are members come to the assistance of nations who are members when there is a national crisis. And the only ones to invoke that have been the Americans, and the Canadians served, as did the Danes, with distinction in American adventures overseas as a function of NATO charter. So I don't get it. The Danes, also small country, extraordinarily loyal to the United States and to NATO, paid tremendous price for their young men for service with the United States in Iraq and in Afghanistan. I don't understand the whole thing. And I worry about what happens if the United States does not have the capacity for early warning against a Russian attack, which could happen. And anybody who thinks otherwise is fooling themselves. the attempt to placate the Russians is dumb because it defies history. And the Russians are very, very cognizant of it, and Putin is very cognizant of it. This is a gas tank with an atomic weapon. That's what Russia is today. There's nothing else going on. So the only way they function is through expansionistic behaviors. It's the only way they can keep the thing going. Military maneuvers. I mean, it's just very much akin to what they've experienced throughout their history. It's just been a chaotic place, moving domestically.
Well, actually, if you don't want, unless you want to continue, I was going to say,
No,
are
no,
there any question, any comments or questions about the international part of this? Does anyone use your raise hand function, and I'll call on you if anyone has any questions? Okay. Oh, yes. Okay. Mr. Coppola, unmute yourself.
My name is Frank Coppola.
Coppola.
My question is that, excuse me, I agree with most you said,
Thank you.
and it's true. But at the same token, the United States seems lost. And, there's got to be some recipe for finding itself. I've been a Democrat since I'm 12 years old. Okay, I'm a registered Democrat. And the last two elections, in all honesty, I'm fed up with, ramming stuff down my throat.
I agree. I mean, I think that the failure of the Democrats to understand that although what they've talked about wedge issues may be very important to smaller groupings within what they think is the Democratic Party electorate, they're not larger, they're not universal arguments that are defensible that the Republicans have been able to pick apart. I mean, Trump recreated the Confederacy, including the border states in the 16 election. He understood very well how to take that alienated portion of the country and pit it against the elites, which he's done very successfully, and he keeps doing. And we, the elites in New York and California, was perceptible elites, even though we're not, in Los Angeles, New York, and Washington, keep falling into the trap. We keep coming up with issues that really don't matter. Instead of universalizing the concerns of people in those places with the concerns of senior citizens, for example, in the Midwest and other places, we stand out because people think that New York, all we care about is gay rights. Now, gay rights are important, and the rights of everybody are important, but you can't build a political party on those kinds of issues.
Absolutely correct.
Attention. And that's what's happened. You can't tell people, I don't like the word Latino. You can't tell people who originate from whose families originate from Spanish speaking nations that somehow they should change their value system to meet the value system that the Democrats of the moment are saying is the appropriate system. I think the Kamala Harris campaign, as someone who's worked on successful presidential campaigns, was a disaster. But the problem here is that what I call the political industrial complex has taken over. There's no sanction for loss, the same way there's no sanction for failure. Therefore, we'll see more of the same kinds of campaigns that require only that enough money be raised and that the timing be right, that the opposition party can win because people are either want change or just pissed off, you'll forgive me, with the way things are. So I'm not hopeful unless there's almost a seismic internal revolt within the Democrat Party, because I don't think they really understand working people. I think they have this delusion, and the reason that seems to be evident is because working people are not voting for Democrats. They're voting.
I agree. I mean, unfortunately, I agree with you. Like I said, I'm a Democrat, a lifelong Democrat that's chosen lately to vote Republican, and I'm not ashamed of it. I mean, my Democratic Party, I got a priest alive for me when I was 12 years old because I was always a big guy. I had a full-time job, okay, to support my family. You show me how AOC understands that. You show me how Schumer understands that.
They don't, because they've never, again, all of us on this call have gotten up to work in the morning and had to make our way and depended upon unions to do what they were supposed to do. We paid our dues for to get us what we needed for our families. Okay. We worked.
And Skippy.
We worked. We also understood, frankly, again, I was there early and often, so I can say these things, but in the municipal labor movement in New York, we made a decision going back 40 years ago and more that we'd be on both sides of the aisle. We'd be with the Republicans in the Senate after they helped us bail out the city in '75, right?
Yeah.
that we'd be with the Democrats in the assembly or whomever was in charge.
Yep.
Why? Because we knew we had to do whatever we had to do to protect whatever gains we'd made and to also use that as a cudgel. Now we fell into the trap, and what we've become is check writing machines for the Democrats in Albany who have done absolutely nothing to help us.
Right.
All right, so I apologize because I can see that. I mean, actually, this is really wonderful. And I think how Hank started it of we might agree, disagree, but this is really a good conversation. But let me we have another hand raised, and then Hank, you want to get into
Sure,
the
then I'll talk about
so Jay, go ahead, Jay.
Yeah, hi, Hank.
How you doing?
I absolutely agree with everything you said. I feel like we're in a redux of Germany 1933.
Well, we are to some extent. There's enough literature, by the way, on income disparities and the rise of what Ann Applebaum, who I kind of like, an author, writes for the now writes for the Atlantic and is a scholar on Russia. What she's called kleptocracies, where you have people in power who go to power simply because they want to earn or they want to steal. And we have a minor kleptocracy in the political class because they're really not interested in accomplishing anything. They're interested in staying in power and they're earning a lot of money. When you consider what public sector workers make and have earned over the last 20 years and what pensions look like, compare what public sector workers have compared to what the public sector workers who sit in Albany are getting, which is, I think, $1.25 plus Lulu's. And that's for no work as committee chairman, plus pensions, plus healthcare, plus expenses, plus Lulu's, which are their daily whatever allowances, significant amount of money. Hi.
And they just propose that if there's no budget, they'll still get paid.
Yeah, I mean, what are they being paid for? In other words, we have become the servants of the political class rather than the political class being servants of us. Now, I come out of the Teamsters, and I used to face District Council 37 on a regular basis, and it was my pleasure when I worked for Feinstein those years to kick the crap out of them and make the point that the people in government are not there to be served by us. Okay, they're there to serve us, and we ought to be taking them out of office instead of having parties for them. Okay, and that's how they get respect. I mean, you don't get respect by anything else. The issue is, how do you make them respect us? They see us as check writing machines.
Right.
Well, we're all too complacent. I would point out Russia has never had a truly democratic government. They've been poets and potato eaters for 1,000 years.
Kerensky lasted for 9 months.
Exactly.
Going back to what you said about 1933, the literature on income disparities is pretty significant. And what you find is these income disparities tend to occur at particular times in history, and they also tend to create
revolution,
democratic regimes as a function of them, which, unless stopped, go to excess. And we see them all over the world. I mean, the classic today is probably Sandinistas in Nicaragua. Okay, Putin, the removal of Yeltsin, and the creation of Putin. Okay, which is what occurred there. Let's see, in Hungary, Orban. They traded Bolsonaro, right, for I think it's how I pronounce his name, for Lula again in Brazil, and on and on and on and on. People go into panic. They seek shelter among authoritarian regimes, and the end result is not so very good. They tend not to leave.
The Philippines as well.
Gentlemen, I apologize because Hank has a hard stop around 1:15 or so.
12:20.
And
politics.
Yeah, so Eileen, and then Hank, you'll.
I find it interesting that you think that AOC never worked in her life. She worked
bartender for 4 months, thank you, in Yorktown Heights, New York. Said the counter.
Wherever she worked, she was.
Said the counterman from Hunts Point.
I'm sorry, you're interrupting me, and I cannot. All I'm saying is that AOC did work. I'm in her district. I've met with her, and I think in many ways she's more what others are. But I'm not here just to, defend her. I think that in many ways she has taken on more of the nonsense. To me, that when you have to ask who really benefits from what's going on with Trump, the only person that really, really benefits is Putin. And we know that he's Putin's puppet. He thinks that Putin is his daddy. And because the only country that tariffs have not been put on is Russia. Isn't that interesting? And how do we bring people to the idea that, oh, this is what's happening? I mean, Putin's thrilled.
I agree with you entirely about Putin. I think he's thrilled. I think he never had such a good day. I think the Chinese are ultimately going to have a good day because the American dollar built their blue water fleet. Americans' balance of trades deficit built their military, which is now probably more significant as a naval force than the United States of America, which should provide some really good times. And Trump is going to ride that to the end of the earth. And, you know, he'll make a deal with China or he won't. But Putin is really the problem in Europe. The Europeans understand it. The Americans, the Trump administration refuses to get it. And we're going to pay the price for it. Significant price. I think you're exactly right.
Right. Okay. So, Hank, on to your next.
So the polls today show Andrew Cuomo with a significant lead in the June primary and overall as the mayor. And that was all well and good, probably until Adams announced that he would run as an independent. So the difference here is that in a general election, there is no ranked choice voting. The argument some would make is the electorate does not broaden to the expanses that some would think. I'm not sure that's the case. In an election like this, which we haven't had since ranked choice voting was introduced. A point of personal preference, I think ranked choice voting is atrocious. I think it's another way to dilute the value of the votes of people who work for a living. It allows a computer to calculate how democracy ought to work, and presumes that people for whom voting is ritualistic, behavioralistic, and habitual will somehow change their patterns because something called ranked choice voting exists. And my view, again, generally, maybe wrongfully so, is that generally reform has an upper class bias, and ranked choice voting is similarly the case. Now, we don't have ranked choice voting in general elections, which tells you how the thing was put together in the first place, and which should change the outcome if Adams runs a real campaign. He has real arguments to make that are not insignificant. I think that the part of what he's going to have to do is somehow explain how things got screwed up in his term and what didn't get screwed up. The police commissioner that he appointed now, Jessica Tisch, is doing a very good job. Crime stats are really good. The job numbers for the city generally are very good. His housing program should be able to generate more units of affordable housing, more than de Blasio planned or was able to get accomplished, certainly. His contracts with municipal laborers, the municipal labor force has been very good overall. But we have other serious internal problems to the city. We live with corporations that require a city that functions in a particular way, and that particular way includes appropriate numbers of police officers. At the present rate of retirement, so we're going to be down. We had a top of 7,200 detectives, for example. We're going to have probably under 4,000 at the present rate of retirement by the end of the year. First line supervisors in the police department will be similarly sergeants. We had 5,500. My bet with the eligible retirements, we could have as many as under 4,000, which means we're going to have incidents because you want our first line supervisors. I mean, the basic systems that we have functioning have been effectively, in many cases, leased out to nonprofits or other kinds of organizations that will never produce the workload or the outcomes that civil servants produce. So that's part of the problem that the Adams administration faces. The corruption charges, I mean, the people will argue, well, look what Trump did for him. But I think that Cuomo has sufficient, if done in a real campaign, when I think only through an independent committee, not through the Adams campaign itself, will be forced to answer for a lot of the things that he did, which are significantly controversial at best and corrupt and mean on the other side of it. So it's not clear. Madami is a serious problem for people who don't agree with the Democratic Socialists and who somehow, are concerned about people who paid no price and bore no burden for what they have to say. My view is always that civil servants have paid a price and borne a burden. That people who go to war or patrol our streets have borne a burden and paid a price. My brothers and I did. So I question whether Mandami and that whole generation of people really, his generation, who haven't done much of that, really understand what's required in running a city, operating it, and his record in Albany is rather thin. Brad Lander will do very well among, particularly I think in the Brownstone Belt in Brooklyn, and the turnouts, he'll push the turnouts up. I think Scott Stringer will do exceptionally well because he always does today. This is all in today. Everything is in the all prediction or in the present tense because 20 minutes, 5 minutes in politics is probably equal to about 20 years on the bottom or anything else. Stringer will do well on the Upper West Side of Manhattan, where Nadler is still seen as a demigod, and that will be a strong endorser. So all things being equal, Cuomo wins that primary today. But I kind of believe that the kind of poll numbers we're seeing for Andrew Cuomo right now are, it's as good as wearing a heavy coat, an overcoat in July, because things change. And Adams has a story to tell. And it's kind of a story, if he does it properly, that's very much like the 69, for those who remember. I'm sure no one here does. The 69 mayoral campaign with John Lindsay, where he apologized for the things that went lousy, but talked about the things that went well. And I think Adams has some things to talk about. And I think he's got some things to apologize for. So I'd mark the fall race a toss-up. I'd mark the primary to Cuomo. I'd blast ranked choice voting. And I'd also note that Madami, the socialist, the Democratic socialist, will be on the ballot on the Working Family Party line in the fall, which doesn't have any working families in my view. And the Democratic Socialists will organize, and they've done very well raising money and organizing around the country, and they will put significant amounts of dollars. I bet that George Soros and his son dumped $3 million or so into Mandami in the fall campaign alone. And that becomes very interesting. And that'll be their first, they won't win, but it'll be the first attempt in what will ultimately, should the population shift continue in New York City, a first attempt at what will ultimately be a successful takeover of the city by the Democratic Socialists. Now, we've had communists in the city council, we've had socialists in the city council, but these folks are not the same as those socialists and those communists. A new generation, a different way of thinking. And I don't think they relate very well to public sector workers or to the things that some of you might find important, like defense of the nation, some level of patriotism, and a belief that we can work better rather than ripping the whole thing up. I don't see much of a record from Mandami, but I think he's an important personality right now. I'm the first guy, I think I said it 6 months ago, that he should be paid attention to. And as usual, I was told I was wrong, but I'm right about that one. So I'll take your questions.
Any questions, comments? Raise your hand, please. John, unmute yourself.
Hi, Hank, independent Jim Walden. He's got, in my opinion, he's got pizzazz. He's very good at making an excellent first impression. He's a very bright trial attorney who thinks quick. I think the Democratic Party machine is very difficult to beat, even if you have Bloomberg's money. I understand that. But I think Jim Walden has a realistic chance. Also, Curtis Lewa's supporter is thinking, in a 3 or 4 way race, he's got a chance. I don't think that's true. Curtis appeals to, say, 30% of the population. A winning candidate has to be able to appeal to 60% of the population.
Right.
But if you press for time, what do you think about Jim Walden?
I've met Jim Walden. I think he's a very smart man, and we need more Jim Waldens in politics. Can he win? I think anything can happen. I mean, is it likely? No, but could it happen? Not impossible. Curtis Lewa. The problem with Lewa is more reflective of our democracy in some ways. Democracies function when political parties function. When political parties cease to function, you really don't have democracy. And when you don't have at least a two-party system that functions, you have splintering off, right? Groups split off. Republicans didn't function the way that the conservatives wanted the conservative party was created. Democrats needed a place to hide. Republicans needed a place to hide. Weren't functioning the way people thought. Note the American Labor Party, and then the split off from the Communist, the Liberal Party. Can anything happen? Sliwa, the Republican chair of the state, will tell you that he really has a good shot. Well, I'm not sure because there is no Republican Party per se in New York City. I mean, New York, if you think about New York County for a minute, just Manhattan, 30 years ago, you had a Republican, I think 30 years ago, a Republican congressman Republican senator, Republican council member, congressperson, and a Republican assembly person. You don't have any of that, which tells you that they're not doing anything. Now, I don't happen to agree with what the Republicans stand for, but I think two parties make democracy work. If you don't believe that, then you have to look at Albany, where there is no democracy, and the same things keep getting done with no threat of sanction, because the Democrats have a supermajority. And that's why one of the reasons why labor unions are not getting much out of Albany. They're getting talked to a lot, spending a lot of money, but you don't get a lot of legislation that works very well out. We need pension reform badly, but it's not happening, right? That's part of the problem. So I think to answer your question, Walden is a good fella who would be who has served as a U.S. attorney, AUSA, and is well respected. Problem is, can he get the money together, which is part of our problem too, and can he put a campaign together? And let's see what happens.
Okay, thank you. John?
Yeah, I wanted to ask, what do you think, the impact of the Trump cuts are going to be? I know poor Adams had a press conference where he talked about how good it is, his relationship, or how well his relationship with Trump is supposed to help the city. And then a few hours later, they announced that the Trump administration is trying to claw back over $100 million they gave for the immigrants.
Yeah.
Many parts.
New York mayors historically have been taught that having a relationship with the president that is at least good is rather important. Gerald Ford told, the great headline in the Daily News, which he really didn't say, but it worked out the way. Gerald Ford to New York dropped dead in '75 when we negotiated the bailout, which I think, I'm kind of a wacko. I think we should have told the banks to drop dead and let the unions not have to loan their money out, your money, which we didn't get back until 2002 entirely, you see? So I'm kind of a radical about it. I'm not unproud about it either. What are they going to take? The statue, what are they going to take? The Brooklyn Bridge and a bankruptcy? Well, really? So Trump will cut the city. He could cut it as much as $700 million. I think that's the total amount of federal direct money we get. Can Adams mitigate against that? I think he can mitigate against some of it. Do I think Trump will continue cutting every place he can? I'm not sure. I think it depends on what the courts do. Some of the stuff is blatantly illegal, and the Democrats have been at best mealy-mouthed. Democrats, when I was a young man, it was about the war in Vietnam, went to the street and lied down in front of buildings or ran or took on the president. Gene McCarthy, Bobby Kennedy, McCluskey, the Republican from the West Coast, put themselves on the line to take on the president. I don't see a lot of that happening. There's 5 or 6 people, Bernie Sanders, AOC around the country, a couple of senators from the East Coast. Markey's been one, a couple of others, but there's not this great attack against Trump in organized fashion. People are demonstrating, but where are the politicians? Where are the senators? Where are the congressmen? They're waiting for the administration to fall so they can keep their power. So do I think that the Trump cuts will be as severe at New York as people think? Not necessarily so. Do I think you would want Cuomo to be elected mayor? Absolutely not. Absolutely not. So we'll see, but I think it'll be severe.
All right, Susan.
Hi, thanks so much. I'm going to report on one question from the chat, and then I had a question. I'll say them both together. The one from the chat the question was, do you think that, let me read. Okay. Do you think that, I'm so sorry. That the city will slowly eliminate civil service by replacing them with consultants and outsourcing. And then part 2 is to ask you to elaborate on what you mean by pension reform.
Right. Okay. I think that the city has tried unsuccessfully, or in some cases successfully, one could argue, to reduce the number of civil servants, but not through consultants as much as through community-based organizations funded by politicians, which is a way of getting around civil service-based service providing and providers, which is just plain wrong. I don't think until you stop that, you'll see an erosion of civil service. I think the other thing to consider is the fact that we're just going to start trading jobs because the budget is not going to be what people think it is. The failure of the city council to really understand how the budget functions and to budget appropriately for jobs that are civil service based. We are, for example, we are down 50% of what we should have in school safety agents right now. As an example, those are the jobs that belong primarily to minority women who support families. You know, they just don't disappear, replacing them with violence interrupters who have no qualifications to do anything. So I'd rather see civil servants who take tests, who are required to function as civil servants in those kinds of positions. I think community-based organizations are taking jobs away from potential healthcare and social service people that are civil servants, Local 371, AFSCME, you know, Social Service Employees Union, others. You know, the destruction of the Department of Correction, which was almost, you'd have to think was planned by the de Blasio administration, with help from the Cuomo administration, which put a discovery reform in place, which made it now impossible in many cases to get people to court because you don't know where you're taking them, because you don't know if there are cases, which has made that a mess. The destruction of the probation department starting under de Blasio, where you've seen the reduction largely what is a job tested into by Black women. It's at 50% of capacity today, maybe less, frankly, than the table of organizations call for. So all this erosion of civil service and the replacement through politics of civil servants by community-based organizations is a dangerous trend, very dangerous trend, and should be stopped. And I think if we had Albany, or we had one house in Albany that was more dependent upon civil servants and municipal unions for their continued retention, we'd have much more authority to do things. Pension reform. Unless there are significant reforms in the pension system as it applies to uniform forces, we're going to lose more cops. We're going to lose more detectives. We're going to lose more people. And we're going to have a real problem. Do I think that the tier 7 is an appropriate way to deal with public sector workers? The answer is absolutely not. People who work their lives for the city and the state ought to be treated fairly. And the politicians, in seeking to balance budgets, will do it on the backs of the people who work for a living, because that's what they always do. And the people who work for a living or have worked for a living are on this call. Examples thereof. And the unions and the retiree organizations ought to be putting it to the guys in Albany and women. We'll remember in November and September, but we're not remembering and we're not voting at the levels we should.
So tell me, there's another hand raised. It's 113.
Minutes, and I really gotta go to the doctor. So let me answer the next question, if that's okay.
Okay. Hank, there's another Hank. Hank Perlin, unmute yourself. Hank?
Hello, Hank.
Hank, you muted.
Hank, you're muted.
All right. So you know what, Susan, is there anything in the chat? I'm so sorry.
No, please.
Susan, anything else in the chat?
Okay, one question. Can New York stop sending our taxes to DC?
The late Senator Moynihan made a point during his career of talking at length about how the balance of trades deficit between us and Washington increases exponentially every year. And we get blamed for taking more, but the fact is we send a lot more out than we get. You can only reverse that if you have a Senate and a Congress, it shouldn't be happening, because the minority leader of the U.S. Senate, who was the majority leader, is a New Yorker. The next Speaker of the House, unless there's some kind of disaster, will be Hakeem Jeffries, the minority leader of the House. That ought to be remedied. But if you look at the expense bills, where is the money going? Cow museums in Alabama, road projects and who knows, and around the country. But we get blamed for asking for federal dollars to build subways, maintain bus systems and subway systems, and public transit across the board. It would be better if we had advocates for New York who are less concerned about, we're just as concerned about maintaining majorities as they were about what happens to average New Yorkers who take the subway and the buses every day, and senior citizens and retirees who rely on city services, but they're not. It's called power. And Moynihan was right to point it out then. He was the only one to raise his voice about it. And sadly, he's the only one who's really raised his voice about it in a long time. And he's no longer with us. So who is really saying anything about it? Nobody.
Yeah. Unfortunately, that's true. Hank Perlin, one more shot.
Sure.
unmute yourself. Okay.
We got one more? Here.
Um,
Hank sent a message.
oh,
Thoughts on Trump's travel policy and UAW position. What's the real UAW position? There was a story in the papers the other day, and I got to go back and look at it, that talked about the UAW reducing its angst about Donald Trump, but that's not the answer. The worry there is then it appears that they would be more worried about the leadership or something, but they're not worried about the tariff issue, which could cost jobs because we build cars in the United States. Well, hold on, wait a second, let me go back. That's not exactly accurate. Spartanburg is a non-union operation. UAW has not been successful in trying to organize there. So tariffs stop what? What they do is, and the UAW should be careful about this, they stop the imports. They do a lot about the cost of steel, aluminum, which is home builders and construction trades, in some cases. So to me, their position is unclear as to what the biggest benefit is. And I think they're more afraid of having a real tussle with Trump than anything else. Or Sean O'Fane wouldn't go backwards, you know.
okay. All right. Hank, it's 1:16.
Give me one more.
Anyone else have any questions or in the chat, Susan? I mean, I'll just make a comment that happens to be that, like, I have a 33-year-old son who is not, college was not his deal. He's a bartender at Madison Square Garden. He does other venue work, a musician. And most of his friends fall into that category. And they're disillusioned, but sadly they're disillusioned, but they're doing nothing about it, and that's such a problem, is that you have, I think, a generation, I said he's 33, of people who just basically have like disengaged.
No,
That's very unhealthy.
they're not voting for the levels we did with intent turnout. They are the data show that there's been surveys on this that show that they don't believe that they will have the same benefits in life that we had.
Right.
They do not believe that they will be able to afford a home. And matter of fact, in many cases, they're correct.
Yes.
They do not believe the economics will be the same.
Yes.
They see the comfortable lifestyle that we had out of reach. They don't believe there'll be Social Security or any of the benefits we've had.
Right.
Do they have anything to stand on? The answer is yes. What is the solution for this? I have no idea. I mean, how do you get them engaged? Voting, well, they don't vote with the same intensity that we did, frankly, people. They're not as engaged in civic life based upon the data. I don't know what the answer is.
Yeah.
And I don't think it begins at home because everyone on this call was engaged.
Right. I mean, we have to tell him, go vote, no matter what, just go, go vote. And, I think the other thing too is social media. They get their news elsewhere. We grew up with Channel 7, the three stations and Walter Cronkite and, whoever. And obviously, now there's, I'm a CNN, MSNBC junkie, but, where they get their information from, I don't even have any clue.
Because the issues of the moment are not as significant as they were when we were growing up or coming into age. There is no Vietnam. Okay.
Yeah.
There is no assassination of a president. Okay. There is no civil rights movement.
Right.
There is no anti-war movement.
Right.
There is no desegregation movement, and on and on and on and on. There is no bankruptcy of cities. The things that we lived through that made us interesting people, frankly, and interested people are not going on. But there will be a new crisis, and that generation will be called to task. We also felt a special responsibility as baby boomers for what our parents had done during the Great Depression and during the Second World War. And we carried that responsibility with us. Our children don't have that. Right. So we can't blame them for the goodness they were given by God's grace.
Yes. Very well said. Yes, that very, very, very well said. Thank you.
Just hope that everybody will get out to vote. And I'm grateful to you for our time together. I hope it was useful.
Yes.
I learned a couple of things. I have to rethink a little bit about AOC, which I'm grateful for being put on the carpet about. And I think I have to think some more. And I understand the Russian danger, but I think I have to think some more about people like Walden and others who really we should be figuring out a way to fund for campaigns the way we fund everybody else, right? Who runs for office? We do. So those voices can also be heard because the cost of campaigning has become very outrageous and, in my view, unnecessarily so.
Right. I mean, thank you. I think that, the way you started this conversation, to say that it's a conversation and that we all have different views, and just the fact that you said what you said, that now you need to want to go back and think about, AOC and some of those other things. I think this was, thank you. This
I
was
think
a
about
great discussion. Thank you.
I'm always going through, some tautology in my brain about, is that accurate? Is it not accurate? I try as an older person not to have harder viewpoints because I want to think things through, because if I've learned anything, and I travel 300,000 miles a year for 30 years doing campaigns all over the world. One of the things I learned was that Jay Wachowski comes up with Citizens United. Citizens United had more to do with destroying this democracy as we know it than anything probably in the last 20 years, unquestionably so, because it allowed corporations to control the discussion, and people without the capacity of corporations to spend money have to have less influence. But regardless, if I've learned anything in the last 30 years doing this stuff, is that the world keeps changing. The only thing that doesn't change is the reasonable complaints of people who don't feel empowered, and that is something we can't repair. And so I'd like to thank you for your time.
Thank you so much. Thank you. Be well.
All the best.
Thank
you.
you.
Thank you so much.
Thank you. Bye-bye. Thank you. All right. Okay, so next on the agenda is, give me 1 second. Okay, is the Comro report. Jay?
Yeah, hi. I'm delighted to hear from Hank. I've known him since about 1968, and we've just run into each other every year or two. But he hasn't changed one bit since I first met him. Henry,
Is that
your
a good
college,
thing? Is that a good thing or a bad
that's
thing?
absolutely is your college's answer to Henry Kissinger. There you go. Okay, Comro, for those of us who don't remember, Council of Municipal Retirees Organization, representatives from a lot of New York City public service unions. Our speaker today, we have one new member participating, Ray Markey, who is from the Librarians Union, which is a very small, it's a group of people, don't get much respect, and certainly don't get much money. And it seems like they're the first on the chopping block, libraries and parks. Anyway, Vinny Alvarez, who's the head of the New York Central Labor Council, spoke a bit on environmental justice, Climate Jobs New York, which is a big program. Vinny he represents Central Labor Council. Don't confuse it with Municipal Labor Committee. Central Labor Council is municipal unions, city trade unions in the private sector, stagehands unions, a lot of other unions in the New York metro area. So their issues are more wide encompassing than our more parochial issues, for instance, retiree health care. They're interested in everybody's health care because they typically have health care provided by employers. Second speaker was Lucia Gomez, who's the political director of the CLC. Their big project lately has been screening candidates for the upcoming elections. They had 6 mayoral candidates they spoke to. There were 2 or 3 very competitive borough president races. I know in the Bronx, I believe in Brooklyn as well. Manhattan is an open seat for the borough president because whoever is running, name skips for a second, is running for another office. And of course, the controller's race is wide open. Their process is they meet with the candidates as often as possible, and their committee needs a 2/3 vote to endorse a candidate. Apparently, they are hesitant to deal with the ranked choice voting in the primaries. They don't want to endorse more than one candidate per office, and they might hold off until the general, but we'll find out. Regardless, vote often and vote early. You heard Hank, we're the generation. I personally have voted in every election. I skipped a few primaries since I'm 19, which was the year that voting became legal. The other good news for we who collect the Part B reimbursement from the city of New York, it should be out the third week in April, whatever that payroll date works out to. The check or the electronic payment will be in the same format as your pension payment. So it'll just look like you're getting an extra pension payment for a different amount. Be on the lookout. If you don't need the money, I'll give you my bank account. You can send it to me. We'll donate half to OSARC and whatever. That's it. Any questions? Pension. The last medical coverage case, which is referred to as the nuclear initiative, nuclear option, apparently is going to the full Court of Appeals in Albany this week. There are buses and demonstrations scheduled. I hope Rob can put up the dates and the flyers or whatever on the website. As Lincoln said, if we if we don't hang together, we should all certainly hang separately. So let's stick together.
Right.
Thank you, Joan. Next.
Thank you. And also just Rich, thank you so much for recommending that Hank speak. I mean,
Sure. Thank you for having him.
yeah, no, that it was really good. It was in perfect timing. Thank you very much.
Right.
And just to everyone else is that Rich, emailed me, and I have encouraged all of you to email me and suggested that we ask Hank to speak, and he spoke. So we really, any other, suggestions, just please, email me. It's Susan, can you put it? It's joan.burvoy@gmail.com. Susan, why don't you put that in? And just to repeat, because we got started much quicker because Hank had a time frame, a hard stop, is that again that we were supposed to have an in-house meeting. When the information went out, we asked retirees to let us know if they would be coming or not, and the response was very poor. It was only 17 people responded, and so obviously we reverted back to Zoom, and obviously there are 75 people on this Zoom. And so, as we say, you've spoken, and we really just, attempted to have an in-house because that's how it was 5 years ago before the pandemic. I had just retired around then, so they were in-house. Maybe like 40, 50 people would show up. Obviously, life has changed, and we've all gotten older, and obviously everyone is more comfortable having the Zoom, and certainly having the Zooms opens the meetings up to people living out of state, or we have people from Florida, Georgia, even Las Vegas, who can attend the meetings, even people who live upstate New York where they just can't get down here, so into Manhattan. And again, people just might not have different reasons why they don't want to come into Manhattan. So we will, which we will be continuing, on Zoom. Health insurance, pretty much Jay covered everything, but I'll repeat it, that our Part B premiums are, they'll arrive the third week of April. And also what Jay said is that I think it's called the Benkowski case, which is there's like 4 lawsuits, and one of them is the Benkowski case, and that's the nuclear approach. That was the one where basically the city was our only option was going to be Aetna, and or HIP. And so that's going to the state to the New York State of Appeals on either I think the 15th or the 16th of May. That is the only information I have. Does anyone else have any information that they can give us or no? Okay.
I'm sorry, is the city bringing the appeal? Who's doing the appeal?
Oh, I'm not sure. I'm not, you know what? Because it's gone, John, and I don't mean to put you on the spot, because I know you said you were involved. I'm not sure because it's gone back and forth. I mean, the city keeps losing. I don't know whose appeal this is. John, would you know? Are you muted?
It's the city. The city just won't let go of this thing.
Yeah.
And Marianne Pizzatola, uh, listen, she doesn't have a PhD from Princeton. She's a retired medic, but she knows she's proven to be the greatest political operative of a generation. She's really been fabulous, Marianne Pizzatola, and we've won every time. And it's the city who keeps appealing this thing. It's my understanding that if the city loses, they're out of appeals on this thing. Before I landed the job as a staff analyst level 1 back in 1999, I was with MetLife for 8 years. Those guys from Aetna, they don't like losing and they're playing a long game. They're like a Roman legionnaire is wearing down the barbarian tribe. They're trying to wear you down, wear us down, that's what they're doing here, and they've lost every time. Marianne Pizzatola has a Friday night 6 p.m. Facebook thing. I recommend it for everybody. And one last thing before I shut up. Jim Walden is 100% behind us, supporting us on this thing. He's great. Jim Walden is a good man, and he'll make a great mayor.
Thank you, John. Thank you. Any other comments, questions? I don't know what to do with myself. The meeting is almost over. We've never had a meeting that's lasted only like a little shy of over an hour. Okay, so upcoming meetings will be in May, and I'm so sorry, May 13th? No, May 14th. Yeah, thank you, Susan.
May 14th.
May 14th, it will be about the World Trade Center Fund. In June, right now, we do not, there was dependent upon the turnout at the April meeting, which there was none. There was possibly going to be a luncheon because in the past, 5 years ago, there was always in June a luncheon. So I don't think we're proceeding with that. That will probably we'll just have a meeting, and then we're off for July and August. And again, any questions, any comments that, yep, Susan?
Is OSA going to back the retirees with a letter to the courts?
So who's asking?
Judy Henson.
So
Gloria.
Judy, so is who? Ozark? Or
Well,
OSA?
OSA, are we
I
going
can't,
to?
I can't speak for OSA, okay?
Okay.
Ozark, the retiree club, several years ago when this began, just decided that we would be a source of information, which we are. We give all the information to the retirees. And that then it would be up to each individual, obviously there are definitely, individuals, who are contributing to Marion, who are involved, involved.
Mhm.
And so that's really what Ozark is doing. And the
So can
information.
Ozark send a letter supporting the retirees for their court case? In other words, I just
Right,
find it
no,
really hard.
so we are not in the position, Ozark, we are not in
Mhm.
a position, again, it's not that we don't, it's not that we don't support, it's just that we're not in a position to do that. Um, we're a club, we don't have resources. I'm not in the office, I'm at home, I'm a volunteer, I go about my business.
I understand that.
So
I'm just asking
there's no,
because
there's no
I got
vehicle,
emails telling me to come out and demonstrate to protect Medicare
right?
for federal employees. And it's just very hard for me to see that when my union won't protect Medicare for me. So I'm just asking, on some level, we are saying we're interested in protecting Medicare, but not for New York City retirees.
No, that's not no, that's not what's being said at all.
Okay.
No. I don't know where no, not at all. One second, Jay, you have your hand raised?
Yeah, vis-a-vis the court cases in Albany, these are past any input by us. This is between the lawyers and the judges right now. And I guess
That's
the
not true,
fourth.
Jay. You can send a letter to the courts supporting this, just like several very high-powered politicians have done, which gives the court something to see that other people back what we're doing. So that's not totally true. Nothing's out of anybody's hands.
And I
It's up to
believe that,
us to insist that the courts follow what should be done. And as a union member, to know that my union is going along with taking away my Medicare is hard for me. I've been a union member all my life. It's just, I don't get it. So I'm trying to understand, Jay. But to tell me that we don't have any say
you
just
cut me
doesn't
off,
work.
honey. You cut me off. At the
I'm sorry.
current level of the case, there is nothing we can actually do. There is, in fact, a bus trip. I don't have the details, going up to Albany to sit in the audience when the actual appeals, because right now they've got the briefs, the lawyers,
That's correct. That's correct.
okay. So the participants sitting in the audience have infinitely more influence, if you will, on the judges. But again, a judge is not supposed to be swayed by public opinion, but by legal argument.
Well, it's the
Be
Supreme
very
Court.
philosophical, but
It's the top court. It's not just one judge. It's a panel of judges.
yes, it's the full Court of Appeals.
That's
That's the
correct. It's the
fourth
top
level. Yeah.
Supreme Court. Right. So what I'm
Not Supreme
saying is
Court. Court of Appeals is above the Supreme Court.
it's New York State Supreme Court. So once it's
No.
decided, then that's the end of it. There's nowhere else for it to go. So what I'm saying is if you're going in front of that court, there are numerous elected officials that have in fact given letters to the attorneys to bring with them to court to show they're in support of what's going on. And like I said, I get that there's a process to all of this, and I have always been a firm believer in Krogan. He's been an amazing leader, but I don't understand the MLC and the unions not helping us. And in fact, they are using their resources to hurt us.
So, Judy,
It is my personal opinion the MLC is the enemy in this case.
Okay.
However, because the way the MLC is constructed, it's a
Okay.
weighted voting power structure. And the
Mhm.
UFT and the DC 37, which basically is the mouthpiece for 66 unions or something like that, they control a vast majority of the voting power on the MLC. So if all the other small unions voted against them, it would still pass. It's DC 37. I think there's avarice involved between DC 37 and the teachers union, the UFT. And again, it's my personal biased opinion that there's more stuff going on than we know about, and that's what we got to deal with. That the MLC is their puppet. and we got to deal with that. Now, restructuring the MLC, I don't know if that's possible. The MLC has served a very viable function for many, many, many years. And even though they say they negotiate for retirees' health benefits, nobody else can negotiate. Even though they don't have the legal power to do so, they've been doing it de facto.
You can't negotiate for retirees because we're not covered by a union anymore.
But
You
de
can't have
facto, they
both.
have done so.
Well, they've decided to do this, correct, and that's why
Going back to
I'm
the
sitting here
1960s.
saying, why isn't my union screaming to protect me? That's exactly my argument, Jay. I'm not fighting. I'm just saying, guys, we're standing here watching this happen, and you're asking me to stand up with you and protect Medicare for the rest of the country, and you won't stand up and protect me? I've paid thousands of dollars to this organization for these lawyers, okay, to protect my Medicare. And they need more money to go through with these lawsuits. We need everyone to start donating to this organization so we can do this. So we
Agreed.
can get someone like that will represent us into City Hall to pass something. So we won't have all the political hacks trying to steal from the retirees because they got nothing better to do than steal from us. That's what I'm saying. We really need to do something here, people. There's another case right now on the copays. And the discussions on the copays are being used to offset the $600 million that they lost because they couldn't charge us from the first case. The $200 a month they wanted. That's the exact amount of the copays. So they're taking the money from us either way. And that wasn't legal. It wasn't in the contract. That's why the judge stopped it originally.
So Judy, I can only comment to you saying that we need to do something of people is that again, everyone, as far as I know, is aware of Marion's organization. People
Okay.
know they can, they can get involved. That information is communicated.
Gotcha.
It is up to each individual to do, what they want to do.
And I understand that.
Wait,
You're
wait, wait,
absolutely
wait,
correct.
wait. So we communicate that, we communicate. Here we communicated that she's having, a rally, that she's supporting, look, we don't take a stance, at least certainly Ozark doesn't, I think, the union might say who they would like for mayor. We don't do that here in Ozark, but John mentioned, everyone mentioned, and that's fine because we're here for information that Marion is supporting this Mr. Walden. So we are
Well,
information.
Morgan is not the only one that's supporting
Okay,
us.
but
Landers is
Judy,
support. There are others.
Judy, we need to stop because the your point's taken. And again, Ozark has, all the retirees, whether they're on the meeting, whether they get on, they get on minutes, whatever, the information is there for them to get involved.
Okay, but the union has no problem sending out telling us to protect Medicare. So if they can do that, why can't they turn around and help us? That's my question.
I can't answer those questions. If you want that, you're welcome to call the union office. Okay?
Okay.
Thank you. Anyone
Joan,
else have their hand raised?
Joan, I have a question. You just said, Ozark does not collectively support these things. I don't understand why, as a union, we cannot do that.
Because we're not a union. We are a retiree club. We are just a retiree club, and a decision was made like several years ago was that again was to be a source of information. Back when it was the first they selected it was called the Alliance like 3 years ago. We had them here 2, 3, 4 times. We must have had like 300-400 people on the call. Then when it was Aetna, and that is all that the information. We are not a structured organization where when you're saying Ozark, we don't have an office. We are not like we don't have an office. We don't have resources. I'm just a chair of a club. So then like you're there's nothing I can do, you know, but but what we can do as an organization is give you information
But
in order to see what to do, so that you can proceed how you want to proceed. But as a club, we don't have the vehicle to do that.
financially, you may.
We don't financially, people, office. This is my home.
Okay.
You're looking at my second bedroom. You know, we're not in the office. We don't,
Okay. But Judith's point is well taken.
but that, yeah,
As
it is,
as a,
it is, it's I don't, necessarily, I don't disagree with her, but this is not the form. I mean, it's a form we can talk about it, but it's not the form in terms of that Ozark can take any action. And it's
Where is the form? Can we get a form done, a forum
forum.
done so we can talk to the union? Because I feel like I'm in like the Twilight Zone. We're not union, but they're making decisions. It's so difficult to
I
process.
understand it, and I think that's something, with Bob Krogan.
well,
Beyond that,
actually,
Nico, you've just made the point. Is that I'll make another point. As a former board member many years ago, just because you don't see it doesn't mean things aren't happening. Number one, I describe to active members of the union is like an iceberg. You only see the little piece that sticks up out of the water. There's so much more going on underneath in terms of services and things like that. Now, politically, OSA, 5,000 members, give or take. What can we do publicly that will help us more than it'll hurt us? Think about it. If we hypothetically endorsed a political candidate for mayor and that mayor loses, like a Bloomberg, to use historical, believe me, they would be going around castrating every member of the union, every male member of the union. God knows what they. There is incredible rebound effect on any action we take publicly. Now, Bob is very wired into the MLC. He's very wired into what we say. I know whenever I'm in the office, I sit down on his couch and we have long discussions. You know how he is historically about, recounting what happened 30, 40 years ago. It's amazing. And I've always said, politicians don't do what they say they're going to do. They do what they can do. The same thing with the union. It's not what we say, it's what we can get accomplished. And a lot of it is sub rosa. And I'm not going to say we're doing either way, except that we're more on the right side of history than the wrong side of history. We'll see what happens at the end. It's an excuse, not a reason, I know, but still, I mean,
listen, all I'm saying is if you want to know why young people are turning against what's going on, it's because we can't give them an honest answer anymore. And I'm not faulting anyone. I'm not asking anyone. I'm just saying to you, either it's right or it's wrong. And if it's wrong, you stand up and you change it. And if you don't, then you're part of the problem. And that's how the unions were created years ago. So I appreciate what everybody does. I know you all work very hard.
We lost you, Judy.
I lost my connection.
Yeah.
No, I'm just saying we're not
you
on
go.
the right side of this anymore if we're not stopping taking away Medicare.
Okay. So,
I'd like to say,
yeah, so let's, just what, I'll call on you. Just one thing is in the chat, Rob did put in, the New York City Retirees.org. So you can go into the chat, because some of you have some questions about the bus, when the buses leave for the rally. So that would be on their website, the New York City Retirees.org website. That's in the chat. So you can take that website down and you can get the information that some of you are asking about the buses for the rallies. Okay, was that Karen?
Yes.
Karen.
I missed part of the conversation due to a phone call, but to the woman, Judy, who's very adamant, I'd like to say, for one, if you have questions for the union, they have a monthly meeting, and I suggest you can attend them via Zoom or in person or whatever you like. For two, as the address was just given, the New York City Organization of Retirees, they're mounting the fights on our behalf. So if you want to give money, I would give it to them. OSA is a small union. Ozark is a non. It's just retired.
Exactly.
We're just
You're
old
nothing.
folks getting together. So
Right.
I don't know. You know,
I've been involved with the organization for 4 years. So I'm very much aware of giving money, and I've given lots of money. But it would be nice to see everyone else stand up and take a stand, because you're all going to lose your Medicare if we don't. And if you get sick, Medicare Advantage is not going to help you.
we understand.
And but
We know, we understand that,
okay.
Judy. I think that you're beating a dead horse. We understand that.
Yes.
Okay, so Karen, go ahead.
If you want to
That's
get
about it.
involved in this issue, the Retirees Association with Mary Ann, after this meeting, go check out their website and check her out. I guess she needs all the troops she can get.
And I get emails every week from her, and you can get on her email list.
Right.
So I guess I missed a little bit of the meeting, and I put it in the chat. There's nothing new on the copays.
No, nothing new on the copay. No.
Okay, thank you, Joan, and everyone for what you do.
Thank you, Karen. And I thought the meeting was going to end early. Francesco?
Yes, I've got a quick question. How do I get in touch with this Marion, whatever?
Oh, so
It's
do you know how to get into the chat? Do you know how to look in the chat, French?
I'm looking at the
Right here.
chat now.
Okay, so paging down. I'm sorry, give me 1 second. And
There's a Facebook group. You can get to her right away.
I'm
Go
not,
into
You're not
I'm not on social media.
right,
Okay.
either am I.
Then you
So,
need the email address.
so it's NYC
NYC?
retirees RETIREES.org.
Thank you very much. I
Okay.
just want to make one comment. I appreciate this club and all the efforts that everybody is doing.
Thank you.
A new member.
Welcome.
It would be nice. I mean, I agree with the comments passed. It would be nice if we had a union. And I think that argument's got to be made with Krogan. If there is, if we need to be a separate union, or if we need to be represented by OSA, and I understand the purpose of OSAR. And I'm grateful that you folks are doing the job you are. Joan, if you could send me your email address, I asked that in the chat. I would appreciate it.
Yes.
I put my email in there.
Yeah, I wrote it down.
I've dealt with John and Jay in the past, and they were, I can't tell you how good they were. I mean, I worked for NYCHA, and I had nothing but angst and aggravation, and I mean, it's unbelievable. That's all I can say. So I'm grateful for Jay. I'm grateful for John, and I'm grateful for OSART. And I, we'd all like more political clout. We'd all like to have more say. It costs money.
Yes.
My grandfather told me when I was a kid, when you drop dead, you need money to get buried from the church.
Thank you. Thank you thank you very much for
Thank you.
For your comments. And I have your email address. When did you retire?
Last Monday. Oh, last Tuesday, the 1st.
Oh, round of applause.
Mazel tov.
A round of applause.
Welcome.
Great. And John, you're a pretty recent retiree, John Manning.
I retired on December 13th, 25 years to the day. the sheriff's office, DOI, Department of Finance tax audit, and Department of Transportation, Office of the Auditor General. The Department of Transportation is as corrupt as a red light district. If I were the commissioner or the IG, I'd be embarrassed. That's how bad it is there. And the money just goes out the window, literally by the hundreds of millions and billions.
They must have worked at NYCHA at one point.
And that's where you work,
Frank, you can call me Frank.
Frank, that's
Yes,
where you
I
work?
worked at NYCHA.
For how many years?
24 years. I was trying to make 25, but you know, I'm recuperating from cancer, and
well,
the
best.
angst and the aggravation just wasn't worth it.
Okay. Well, the best to you. All right. Any it's fun. It's interesting. Just even I think maybe we need to do this at the end of each. I think maybe we say this and then we don't because the meetings tend to run long. And this meeting was shorter, but to have this kind of open discussion and the fact that we have two people here who have recently retired, it's kind of good to hear. I mean, just quickly so that you can know. I mean, I retired well, I think I said that already. I retired 6 years ago, but I worked for 41 years at Health and Hospital Corporation. So I started when I was 10 years old, and but
Right out of junior high school. There you go.
right out of junior high school. You know, my parents said you got to get out there and work. So that's but actually I am not shy about almost anything. I'm 71 years old. I worked till I was 65. I happen to have liked my job, despite lots of crap, but I happen to like my job. Anyway, any other comments, questions? No? Okay, well, actually, we're still ending early. Thank you. Thank you all for attending. Thank you all for your comments, your feedback. And we look forward to seeing you in May. For whatever holidays that you celebrate this month, enjoy them, be well, take care of yourselves. Bye-bye.
Thanks
Thank
again,
you.
Joan.
Thank you, Joan.
Bye-bye.
Thank you, everybody.
Thanks for organizing it, Joe.
Thank you. Thank you.